I've been wanting to talk about folk Catholicism more, but let's be real, it's kind of scary talking about it on social media. I don't really share this part of my practice very often because it feels like the second that you mention Christianity in a witchcraft space, people automatically assume the worst, and I think that's part of why there's so little representation of folk Catholicism in the modern witchcraft community. I come from a good old-fashioned New York Irish Catholic family. I have 4 aunts and 8 uncles on that side, so I feel like that kind of speaks for itself. My grandma didn't drive me to mass too much, so thankfully I had a pretty Catholic-adjacent childhood without a lot of the religious trauma. And it's really funny because when my parents separated for the first time, my mom switched me to a Lutheran church and private school because apparently the divorce really was soul deep. And honestly, I think that Martin Luther would have admired her level of pettiness. But to be honest, that didn't last very long. We were never exactly a prim and proper Sunday best kind of family, if you know what I mean. So I wasn't necessarily raised super religious, but I've always had a soft spot for folk Catholicism and the culture surrounding it. Saints, holy water, medals, candles, prayers, psalms, none of that was foreign to me. And as my own practice developed, I found myself naturally returning to a lot of those traditions through the lens of folk practice. I think part of the disconnect is that Christianity often gets treated as one monolithic tradition in witchcraft spaces, especially in the United States. A lot of people's understanding of Christianity is shaped by evangelical Protestantism, but folk Christianity and evangelical Christianity are not the same thing. There are centuries of folk traditions built around saints, relics, blessed objects, healing practices, protective prayers, and other forms of folk devotion that are deeply woven into people's cultures. And depending on where you are in the world, or even what family you come from, those practices can look completely different. For me, folk Christianity doesn't invalidate the other spiritual traditions I work within. I view it as another spiritual network I can draw from. I think that we sometimes carry this idea from organized religion that spirituality has to be exclusive, but that isn't necessarily how folk practice works. Plenty of practitioners work within multiple spiritual networks at the same time. Folk Catholicism is just one part of my spiritual ecosystem. It doesn't have to be all-encompassing. That was actually really important to me when I wrote my spell oils field guide. Folk magic and Christianity have been deeply intertwined historically, and I didn't want to strip that context out of the book just to make it more palatable to a modern witchcraft audience. So alongside my spell oil recipes, I included folk Christian prayers and psalms where they were appropriate. And believe me, I understand that a lot of people don't want to practice within a Christian framework. So I created non-religious prayers and charms as an alternative, because ultimately what I want to teach is the foundation underneath the spell work. Folk magic gets misrepresented and completely stripped of context on social media all the time. People are taught spells and correspondences without being taught the cultural and historical framework that these traditions actually come from. A strong foundation in folk magic isn't about memorizing recipes. It's about understanding the traditions behind what you're doing so you can actually think and work like a practitioner. And I think approaching folk magic that way can give you an incredibly strong foundation for your spiritual practice as a whole. That's also what I've been teaching in my Folk Magic Fundamentals unit on Patreon. The entire unit is free, along with my growing library of occult resources and workshops. So if you're interested in actually building a folk practice instead of just collecting spell recipes, all of that is there as a free resource for you. And that brings me back to the little bottle you've been watching me make throughout this entire video. I've decided to start sharing some of my family's folk Catholic traditions through a small collection of saint devotional oils, starting with everyone's favorite, Archangel Michael. Or, as my grandma liked to call him, Big Mike. Listen, I'm only starting with 10 bottles, okay? I'm not trying to get crazy, and I'll make more whenever inspiration strikes. Over time, I'd love to build a small collection of saint devotional oils rooted in the recipes and traditions that I grew up around. And more than anything, this is just a way for me to share a little piece of my family's folk tradition and celebrate the cultural exchange that has always been such a huge part of folk magic. Straight from my folk altar to yours.